Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What's going on, Internet? Eric Van Holtz here, back again with another e-commerce conversation. I have, a longtime friend and almost an idol to me in the YouTube marketing space, Jack Haldrup. How you doing, man, with Dr. Squatch?
Doing great, Eric. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I think it's been, I don't know, we first connected probably, it seems like 5 years ago. It's been a number of years.
Yeah, I think it was through E-Commerce Fuel, and you're definitely a brand that we've followed along. And, I see you on TV all the time on that ShipStation commercial. I feel like that went a long way for you guys.
Yeah, that's a little bit of, good luck. I'm always willing to whore myself out for case studies. And they didn't even tell me it was going to be a commercial, and ended up, I think they had like nearly 14,000 airings so far, which is, I'll take it. But you guys have done some pretty impressive things on YouTube, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been a pretty wild last few years, and we've certainly done a lot there and can dive into that.
For our listeners who've never heard of you guys, what is Dr. Squatch?
We're a men's personal care brand, and we really focus on natural products for guys. And soap is our hero product. It's what we started with. It's our biggest category. And recently we've been expanding a little bit, just launched a deodorant in November, and that's off to a good start. We try to create a product that is natural and kind of specifically formulated for guys.
Yeah, so those who listen would probably think of Dr. Squatch as almost like a direct competitor to Beard Brand. But the way I kind of view it is like we're kind of side by side trying to take a chunk out of Procter & Gamble and all those megacorps out there.
Totally. There's a lot to take there.
Yeah, a lot to take and a lot to, I think, to educate and to improve and to grow as well. I think there's a lot of people, especially in the guys market, who still haven't woken up to what they're using on their bodies and how they can use it. And
yeah, I think that it's not very fragmented compared to other categories, or even just kind of like the female side of things. You see a lot of fragmented brands there, where in the men's space, you still see, a very small kind of handful of mass brands owned by a very select few companies.
Take me back to the early days, because you're essentially selling one of the most commoditized products of all time that's been around for hundreds of years. Like, how do you break into that and build an audience that can resonate and actually make that switch?
Yeah, totally. So for some context, I started the company in 2013 officially, and had been thinking about it for maybe 6 months or so before that. And so if you can rewind, back to that time, or the listeners out there, the book that was really popular at the time was like the 4-Hour Workweek. And I was also reading Lean Startup. And so that was my mindset in terms of where I was thinking about coming at this from as an entrepreneur. And so I was very much looking for like an insight from my own personal experience, and to kind of start with like a specific niche. And so I certainly didn't do some market research and say like soap is a great category to go after. I actually had the experience of, trying this product, which is called cold processed soap, at a farmer's market, and just really enjoyed it. And there's probably a couple of reasons for that. I had some skin issues, or do have some skin issues, and have always had sensitive skin and been a little bit interested in that type of stuff. But ultimately, trying the product was such a better experience than the typical body wash or bar soap that I would get at a store. And so that was something that stood out to me. And so I really came at it from that perspective of like, for me, this was a great experience. And I bet there's other guys like me out there, and I'm going to try to find those customers. And that's really the only mindset that I had at the time.
Yeah, and you were doing it just purely online, or were you doing, shows and fairs and stuff like that as well?
I was doing online. I had a business partner at the beginning, and we actually did a lot of just door-to-door sales. And that was a huge part of our business for the first year or two. And it wasn't sophisticated. We didn't go to a lot of trade shows or anything. We literally just walked around town and knocked on people's doors.
Like residents or?
No, sorry, to little boutiques, right?
Okay.
We would drive around. We would go to Portland. We were in Seattle, came down to California. We would just drive around. It certainly was not the most efficient way to scale a business.
Well, I would imagine you say that, but I would imagine there's so much information that you learn by being present with your customers. and being able to kind of modify your language or modify your product. Was there any of that in those early days?
I think so. You have to refine the sales pitch, and he was more of the sales guy than I was, and I was a little bit in the background, and I was kind of like pursuing more of the online approach, and he was kind of pursuing that. But that gave us a foundation, to have some money to invest into the online side of things. But yeah, we would certainly learn there. But I think a lot of the people kind of just took a chance on us because we were there, and came in, so they respected that.
Yeah. It's funny, like sometimes it's not the best product or the best deal, the lowest price. It's just being there is the way to win your customers. And a lot of your competitors aren't willing to do the work to get in front of them. So it's a good lesson there.
Totally.
You mentioned, it sounds like he's no longer your partner anymore. You guys separated, or how did that move on?
Yeah, we did. He's a really good friend of mine, has been for most of my life since we were younger. And, I think that we each had a different vision for the company and what we wanted to do with it. And so I'd kind of started the company originally and then brought him on, maybe 8 months into it. And then, that lasted for 2 or 3 years. And I think that he was really critical during that 2 or 3 year period to helping us get through that and to scale during that time. But I think that we kind of reached a point at that level where he didn't want to take the next phase of the journey in terms of scaling the business.
What was that vision? Was it bringing on outside investors?
Totally. Yeah. For me, and I'm sure you can relate to this to an extent, I believe, from last time we talked, you were mostly bootstrapped or maybe fully bootstrapped, but, we were that way for a while. And I think, after running that for maybe 5-6 years, I didn't want to continue down that path for another 5 to 10 years. And I wanted to either blow up the business in terms of really scale it, or I wanted to kind of maybe make it passive or find a new project to work on eventually. And I didn't want to keep it as kind of like a small business, if you will, or a lifestyle business, if you will, which it was what it had been up to that point.
So you go the outside investor route. I essentially would assume you use that money raised to buy out your business partner.
That happened about a year and a half before we took any money, because we were basically funneling a lot of our sales and profits to the buyout. And so we kind of had to clean that up before taking on outside money. But we did a basically self-funded buyout transaction.
Yeah, that's nice. So you were the 100% owner at that case?
Yeah, roughly.
So you raise money with the intent to scale. And based on what I see and the amount of ads I get on YouTube, you guys found that magic button to scale the business. Kind of talk about that rocket ship from bringing on investors and then pulling the right levers and accelerating the growth of the company.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot to unpack here. So we can definitely dive into different areas. But, like I said, I think first and foremost, just I changed my vision for what I wanted and what the company, what I thought it could become. And so I started thinking bigger and wanting to take it to that level. And, so I started being open to that idea of meeting investors and raising money. So going through that process, I met a handful of people and ultimately chose a partner that I felt like would add a lot of value. They were based in LA and they invest in some other consumer companies. And they just had a very open portfolio network of kind of all consumer brands that were non-competitive. And so it was a kind of like a tight-knit, almost like advisory community. And so I could see that adding a lot of value. And then they had kind of just gone down this path of scaling and selling a couple companies. And so, they had enough of a track record there for me to feel confident in making a partnership there. So that's how it kind of started. And then I would say it's gone incredibly well for us. We had maybe 5 people on the team and we're around a $5 million company when that happened. And, fast forward to today, which is a year and a half later, we've got probably over 150 people on the team. We've built out like a manufacturing facility and we'll do over 100 million sales this year. So I think for everybody involved, it's gone relatively well, I would hope. And, paid media, kind of the video side of things has been a huge driver of that among a couple other factors.
A couple of things that are pretty unique in that I had the founder on a previous podcast of Schmidt's, Jamie Schmidt. I don't know if you're familiar with her brand or not.
I am, yeah.
And it's actually a very similar story to you. She started by selling at like fairs or what are they called? Farmers markets in Portland. And then she would sell to anyone, hustled. And then they made their products as well. So I would imagine there's a lot of complexities to being both a manufacturer and like scaling your marketing as well as scaling your production. Were there any kind of like regrets in that process?
It's an interesting question. No, I don't have any regrets. And we've been very fortunate. Like I'm very grateful that we were in a great position. We were able to take advantage of things and are very fortunate to be where we're at. I think, we have incredibly smart people on our team that made that all happen, and so there's a lot of that and there's a lot of good fortune, I think, that went into it.
Is that something you're continuing to do for all the products you're developing down the road? Are you going like the color pop strategy, or are you branching out?
We will do it slowly. And there's certain categories where it makes a lot of sense. And there's certain categories where it doesn't make quite as much sense, whether that's due to the complexity of the production or whether that's due to really like the proprietary or uniqueness level of the product. And I think how much we feel like value we could add to that process. So soap was the big one that we started with, and it was really a requirement just due to the scale we were at. There's basically not enough available supply in the market. And so we had to, create that ourselves. So we didn't really have a choice when it came to soap. And then as we look at other categories, there's a couple of factors, like I said, that would go into that decision.
Yeah. So, I mean, going from 5 million to 100 million is just unreal. And that was in a period of what, like 3 years, would you say, or?
About 18 months.
Okay. Yeah. A year and a half. Holy shit. That's like strapping onto a rocket ship, man.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
How many times did you move in that period?
Well, it's funny. We had a townhouse. We're in Venice, Marina del Rey area now. So we had a townhouse here when we first kind of started scaling in LA. And for a while, it was maybe like 8 of us, and it made a lot of sense. And it was like the right amount of space. And then we quickly kind of grew to 20, and that was way too much. And so, we got an office, and then we finally moved into the office this January. And we might have had like 35 people at that point in the office. And then, we were only there for about 45 days before COVID hit. So we had to close it down, and we haven't been back in there since. And so now we've actually outgrown that office. And so we signed a 5-year lease and got about 45 days of use out of it so far.
Well, I was talking with my business partners about signing a lease here or buying a property. And one of the best things you can do is outgrow it, because that means you got more cash to pay for it if you need to. The worst is if you have to scale back. So you can always use it for like a little studio or...
Yeah, I think we'll have to figure it out. I think we're considering different ways to run the company. And, I think next year is going to be really interesting, and I'm sure it's on everybody's mind, and that has a physical presence in terms of like how that's going to go and when they're going to be fully back. We'll probably take a pretty flexible approach. And so we may even have a part of the year where we're doing like testing out a model where not everybody has a permanent desk, and it's maybe more of like a kind of like a hot desk situation where people are coming in 2-3 times a week.
Yeah, that's kind of how we're leaning as well here at Beard Brand. Is it's kind of like the WeWork, almost like a private WeWork for our team members. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. And I haven't talked to you in a number of years, but I assume that blonde-headed, bearded, wonderful spokesman had a big impact on the growth of the company. Was YouTube the number one channel for you guys during your growth?
It's been YouTube and Facebook both, but I'd say that video kind of put us on the map. And so it was a very serendipitous, organic process that happened. So we made a first video with that actor in 2018. I was actually in San Diego at the time, and we were working with a marketing agency there for maybe 6 months or so. And we wanted to do something bigger and more impactful, but we weren't quite sure what that would look like. And so we just decided on basically trying to create a viral video. And so, we studied a lot of things that were out there in the market already. People had done this style of advertising before us, and we kind of tried to unpack it, see how, from our understanding, like how it was working and what would be basically like our version of that. And so, that was the process that we went through, which was in early 2018. And, the agency ended up finding him because they were doing a bachelor party for somebody that worked for them. And they were at a comedy show for like San Diego's funniest comedian. And he ended up winning the show. And they were just like, this guy would be perfect. We don't know if he's done any acting before, but he would be perfect for the brand. And so they just approached him, and he was in. And so we all kind of just like had no idea what we were doing, but just, just created that experience or that video.
So at the time, were you guys still around a $5 million company?
Yeah.
And then how big of an investment was it into this ad? Like how big of a risk was it for you guys?
We were maybe like more like a $3 million company at the time, probably. And I think we ended up spending like $18,000 all in on the video, which is incredibly efficient, but felt like a massive investment for us at the time.
Yeah. I mean, if the video doesn't hit, then that's essentially $18,000 down the drain, right?
Yeah. And we had never really paid for content before. So it's kind of like, oh man, this is scary.
How did you know, or when did you know that the video was successful? What were the metrics you guys were looking at?
We actually launched more on Facebook. This was in 2018. And towards the second half of 2018, YouTube actually unveiled some kind of new, more direct response oriented marketing options and functionality. But at the beginning, it wasn't even a platform that we were paying attention to. And so I was still running the Facebook ads at this point, actually. I knew it was a success because it just kind of started to automatically work and scale like crazy at something like a $2 or $3, cost per customer acquisition for a couple weeks. And that was just insane. And so that was like, a pretty clear indicator that, okay, there's something here.
Is that like the number one metrics that you're looking at in terms of your content is the cost per acquisition or?
I would say at that point, but we weren't very sophisticated. I would say today we're a lot more sophisticated in terms of how our team looks at different things. We pay a lot of attention to looking at what's stopping people like in their feed, like what's grabbing their attention and like what's retaining their attention, especially for kind of top of funnel advertising is really what we'll look at. For YouTube, it's similar, but it's really getting people to invest in watching your video beyond, the skip.
Yeah.
Or taking action.
Yes, we've kind of dipped our toes into YouTube marketing without the same level of success you guys have had, but we kind of like get a feel that a video is going to be successful or not based on the view rate metric. And we're kind of shooting for like a 30% view rate. Is that one of your early indicators?
Yeah, totally. View rate and cost per view are definitely early indicators. I think 30% off the top of my head sounds really strong. I'm not in the weeds on a lot of this stuff today. Like what we were seeing, and one thing that is interesting between YouTube and Facebook, and I think it makes it a little bit hard to measure, but what we were seeing with YouTube was just incredible brand engagement with the videos. So we were paying in our heyday something like 2 cents per view. And then you kind of try to unpack like, what does that really mean? And on YouTube, what we found was that our average view time for somebody who actually viewed a video was like 1 minute and 58 seconds. And on Facebook, we were paying somewhat similar for a cost per view. It's probably gone up since then, but there was like an 8-second view length. And so we knew that like the direct performance on Facebook was better, but we had this like giant investment of like, okay, people are spending 1 minute, 2 minutes almost investing in watching our brand content. And we know that that has to have some value.
So without like seeing the direct response, conversions come from it, you just put your faith into it and you just kind of cranked it up from there.
Yeah. And nowadays, like one thing that we do is, we've played around with doing what I call like, fancy attribution modeling. And it hasn't been that helpful for us. We haven't necessarily found like the answer, but what really works for us is just a simple post-purchase survey. And so we can kind of like evaluate where people are saying they first heard about us. And so what we see with YouTube is a lot of attribution to that channel based on this survey that doesn't necessarily come through on the platform metrics.
Yeah, I've talked about this on the podcast before. We use a post-purchase app called Grapevine for $3 a month that allows you to ask that one question. And it was the best investment we could ever make because you get the real data of how people are first finding you.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I recommend that to everybody because I was blown away at how simple and impactful that is.
Of course, no data is perfect. You only get 20% of the people filling it out, but you can kind of extrapolate it up to 100% to kind of get a better gauge or a better feel for what it's going to be doing. Speaking of your website, you guys are pretty heavy on the subscription. Is that a big part of your business, or do you find people are mostly buying one-off products or orders?
Yeah, no, great question. I think it's definitely a big part of our business. We like to just meet people kind of where they're at. So because of the scale that we're going for, I kind of look at it as, there are people that like to buy on websites. Like there are people that like subscription services. There are people that like Amazon. There's people that like retail. So over like a long enough time horizon, we just want to be in all of those channels, kind of meeting those customers where they're at and trying to provide the best experience we can. That being said, the subscription, I think that every business, that sells a consumable product should try to be what I would call like a subscription enabled e-commerce, because there's really no downside. And we certainly try to nudge our customers towards subscriptions by making it, valuable, whether that's through cost savings or exclusivity. And, it's probably 30 or so % of our overall kind of revenue. It's a big part of our business and it's very strong and tends to be kind of our most valuable customers.
I guess with subscriptions, we've had issues where you kind of hit this point of essentially lack of growth because the amount of people you lose through churn, you're not able to kind of, the leaky bucket, I guess is what they call it. You guys haven't run into that point of the business yet?
Yeah, we're scaling pretty fast, like I kind of said. And so I think that helps a lot because we're adding a lot of people to the top of the bucket. I think that there's a need for a soap subscription in the sense that it is a consumable product, but we do see people canceling they have too many soaps or something like that, or they don't like the product. I'd say it's definitely a challenge and something that we manage in terms of trying to optimize it, but it still is a valuable part of our business.
Yeah, I would imagine as you bring in deodorants and shampoo and conditioners, it also brings an extra layer of complexity to the buying decision as well. Do you feel like at a certain point, like there's too many SKUs for a subscription?
It's a great question. I think whether or not it's a subscription or kind of even the store, I do think that it's something to manage very carefully in terms of just how you present stuff to people. So, I think we have an amazing web team and I think they're really good at this. And so we always try to kind of put multiple steps into the process to really, I would say, like reduce the optionality. So when you're signing up for the subscription, it's very much a flow where you can only kind of choose a limited number of options at a given time. And so there's not like that decision fatigue. But it's definitely something that we've tested. And I think that something that really works well for e-commerce is adding those like little upsell or decision points at different parts. So like, subscription or not, like you can add that, whether you have a cart page or more of like a cart pop-up, you can add those options there. You can do stuff, right on the checkout page. You can do stuff post checkout. And we certainly try to take advantage of that as much as we can. And I think it makes it an easier decision for people because it's kind of like, yes or no, do I want to add this versus kind of like they have to shop the entire store.
Yeah. A couple of things I noticed. You guys are running Shopify and Recharge for your website, but you have developed essentially like a custom flow for people with the subscriptions, correct?
Yeah.
What percentage is going to your website versus Amazon versus retailers? And do you feel like Shopify can still handle your company as it continues to grow and scale?
We get about 85% of our revenue from our website and then the rest from Amazon. We have boutique retailers that sell a little bit here and there, but it's not a substantial part of our business today. We're hoping to expand into more larger scale brick and mortar over the next couple of years, but that's kind of where it sits today. I think Shopify is a great platform. We moved over from Cratejoy actually in February of this year. And I think that was a really good time for us to make that decision. And so we saw dramatic improvements, I think, on Shopify versus that in terms of on-site performance, as well as kind of like on the back end dealing with the data and different things like that. So I don't think we've seen massive challenges with Shopify to date. I know that there's companies out there that are bigger than us on it. I don't think it's in our near-term plans to do anything differently there, but I think it's something that's worth keeping an eye on.
As I think of a business, like I've always visualized the potential for Beard Brand to be where you guys are at, $100 million company. Has Dr. Squatch exceeded your vision for the company, or where do you think the potential is for it?
I never have positioned myself as an oracle of the future. And I've been, I think, oftentimes probably maybe too modest in some of my expectations. But I would say, especially from where I started, has completely blown my expectations out of the water, which is really cool experience. I think just a testament to you being able to kind of create things. I would say the vision has gotten bigger over the last couple of years. And so I think that we're, fulfilling that vision. I think it's gone better than we could have expected. I think this might sound silly, but, when I really kind of thought about it, at the end of the day, like if you have let's say a certain group of customers and a certain category of products in a certain like channel that you sell that equation has a cap to it. But if you want your business to be bigger or more than that, then you just need to do more things, whether that is more types of customers or more types of products or different, channels that you're selling in. And, it's a simple way to view it, but at the end of the day, like it really can be kind of what you want to create within that ecosystem.
Along those lines, one of the things that we looked at was, have we fully captured the American market? And at the time we were selling to Europe and we're like, no. And we believe that we can capture more customers in America and then eventually branch into Europe. So, along those same lines, I assume most of your customers are here in the States. And then you've got, future channels and sense of international business. And,
In terms of international and retail, we've taken a similar approach where we wanted to reach a certain scale within like what we were already doing well. And that I think allowed us to grow really quickly because we were so focused on that. And I think that now looking over the next couple of years, we're at the point where we want to expand beyond that in terms of both international and both retail. So we don't have hardly any international or retail presence today. We're at the point now where we just have more resources to put to those things, when we choose to go after them.
Video has been a big part of how you're growing through paid acquisition. Are you guys doing any kind of influencer marketing currently or plan on branching into that?
It's not a huge part of our budget. And we've tried it. It's a little frustrating because we feel like we haven't quite been able to crack it. And so we're certainly continuing to do smaller scale stuff here and there, but it hasn't been able to really match the efficiency of what we can do just internally with our own kind of Facebook spend.
In addition to that, I guess like TV and broadcast seems like a natural progression for you guys.
We've done a little bit with streaming, but we kind of haven't found that efficiency. We've actually, somewhat surprisingly to me, we've found that Snapchat has been a very effective channel for us and has like a surprising amount of scale to it than we would have thought, especially for like our customer base.
Are you repurposing the ads you're creating, or is it different type of content for each platform?
We always tailor it to the platform in terms of the stuff like the size and the experience and the texture kind of graphical overlays. But when we do a video shoot, we're certainly trying to leverage that to be able to be used across a lot of different platforms. And a lot of times that's just kind of like, I'd say there's kind of like three main formats where you have like square video, for like Instagram and Facebook. You have vertical video for something like Snapchat or maybe like a stories. And then you have like more of the traditional like widescreen video for YouTube. So when we do our shoots, we're actually more focused on just like capturing the video in those different types of formats. And then we know that we have the raw footage to be able to create for all the different platforms or placements.
Yeah. I want to go back to your time of going with the agency. I assume you guys are still working with them, correct?
Yep.
How do you view that relationship in terms of who's responsible for what? Are you guys doing paid in-house? Are they doing paid? Is content creation purely on them? Are you coming to them with ideas? Walk me through that process so someone listening would be able to figure out how to manage a successful relationships with a creative firm.
Yeah, totally. So we do all of our own paid like media buying or paid, media optimization. So we have internal team completely focused on that. And then when it comes to content, it's a mix of like internal and agencies. I think with agencies, like you want to find the right partnership in terms of being just an extension of your team and kind of like what you don't have resources in. And so a lot of times that's either like basically like what I'll call like the really creative ideas. I think as a business owner, you want to understand like your USP and you really want to understand like what drives, sales and excitement for your product. But the agency really brings a lot of that stuff to life for us. And then, they also have just like all of the expertise in terms of like the shooting and the production and the editing of the video. We do have like some of that expertise on our staff, but it's more so that we can like cut up and modify what they produce than to shoot stuff like completely originally on our own. And so for us, that's been, the right partnership over the past couple of years.
I assume since you're doing the ad buy, they're not taking a percentage.
No, they're not. We have a retainer-based kind of relationship there, and then it's based on kind of like number of videos and basically like kind of like time spent on that.
They don't have any problems with you hacking up their videos and readjusting them for ads and all that?
No, I mean, I think you want to obviously just build a good relationship there. And I think that we've become, a pretty valuable client for them. And so we're including that with kind of like within all of the rights that we would have for the content.
When you're doing a new ad, how many versions of it are you testing? Is it just going with your gut in one version, or will you have multiple versions and kind of pick a winner?
It used to be going with the gut, and we still try to come up with like especially when we're doing like what we call like a hero video, like a flagship one for maybe like a new product. We definitely want to kind of come up with that one best version, but typically we will do a lot of different segments. And I'd say the two biggest things that you're looking at there is basically the first 5 seconds. And so trying different things within that first 5 seconds to capture attention, because that has so much impact. And that includes like, the screenshot that you use or the thumbnail. And then I would say there's also a lot of variation just with different links. And sometimes that's because of different platforms or different placements. Like YouTube, for example, we found that there's no downside to having really long videos there because people can always choose to disengage when they're kind of done with the experience. And so for YouTube, some of our most successful videos are over 5 minutes long, whereas like that would definitely not be an optimal, experience for Facebook.
Forgive me because I'm not into Facebook at all, but it's not an optimal experience because Facebook will penalize you for only having a certain percentage viewed, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like in terms of the like fundamentally why that wouldn't work. I think for one, Facebook, they tend to know like what their users engage with, and they tend to know like this person will generally engage with, let's say, 20-second videos, and they'll serve them that content. There's going to be just a very small audience of people that have the attention span for that type of engagement on Facebook. I think because of the nature of the platform, it's a scroll platform. Whereas with YouTube, people are there specifically to watch video, you're a little bit more able to just capture them with your content and get them engaged in it. I think that's a huge part of it. I think Facebook probably has their own kind of algorithms and optimism around kind of like what they want people to see and for how long they want them to view that.
Yeah. You mentioned the first 5 seconds. Do you have any lessons learned that you can share in terms of what are going to be kind of like best practices to get that interest within the 5 seconds? Like what kind of things are happening?
It sounds pretty simple, but I think one thing with agencies that we've seen is that you need to partner with them to really provide the feedback loop. And some of the stuff that I think would be intuitive if you're used to like using these platforms or running ads on these platforms. Like basically you want something very visually engaging on the screen to capture attention. Whether that for us, that might be like a guy in his shower, like lathering with our soap, right? The agency, at least some of the ones that we work with, they tend to think oftentimes more in like a story narrative. So they may have like dialogue that they think is very important at that beginning, but that's not going to capture anybody's attention. And so I think it's been kind of like this feedback loop of just like making sure we're doing stuff that's visually engaging. And for our brand, that can be a lot of weird stuff too. I think we've had a lot of success recently with like this ball concept where somebody might be holding like tennis balls or something else like that. And it's just kind of like a way to grab people's attention. And it obviously relates to our product somewhat and to kind of like to guys and what we talk about. But, ultimately with digital media, there's no shortage of the ability to test those different ideas.
Yeah. This has been a load for me. I'm like taking all these mental notes. So hopefully you'll be seeing some Beard Brand ads if we do it right and we can find that unicorn scale ad that we're still searching for. Where can people learn more about you or follow you or support you?
Yeah, no, I don't really maintain any social presence. I've been kind of so heads down in the business. I think if I'm going to recommend anybody to follow one thing, it would be the Dr. Squatch Instagram. I think it's pretty entertaining.
There you go. And buy some soap, right? Buy some soap and shampoo, conditioner, deodorant.
Totally.
Support them, see how they do it. Go through their subscription flow. Man, I appreciate having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. This is great.
This has been another e-commerce Conversations. Hope you guys were able to pick up a nugget or two. I know I have. Thanks for listening. Cheers. Keep on growing.